Setup positions for the iron and the driver. Why don't I take a normal setup? We'll kind of talk through some of the pieces.
Sure, absolutely.
So I've just got a 9-iron here, right? And if I were to kind of take my normal 9-iron setup, Marty, if you want to kind of guide me through some of the...
So what we would see the spine more vertical.
Yep.
Okay. We might see you tilted forward a little bit more than you would with a driver, just for the sole purpose of the iron. 9-iron is a lot shorter than the driver.
Yep.
So it might require more forward tilt.
Got it.
Which, couple that with this vertical spine, is going to enable you with proper wrist conditions at impact to hit down into something.
Got it.
All right.
Yep.
As far as ball position, we would see it center or slightly forward of center.
Yep.
Versus a driver, which would be well forward of center, or opposite left toe, left heel, somewhere in that vicinity.
Gotcha. So some of the basic pieces, that's exactly what I would say the same pieces, right, is obviously the tilt is going to be less.
Correct.
Right, so maybe with a 9 or an 8-iron I might have like a degree 2 or 3 of tilt, but minimal tilt. Less on a driver.
Correct.
I'm going to have more bend, right? I'll be more bend
more
over,
forward flex, yeah.
Forward. And then my ball position wouldn't be as forward, and really all of that to help get the ball, hit the ball then the turf.
Correct.
Compared to the driver. So that would be my iron setup.
Yep.
And then if we were to bring in the driver and kind of look at that compared to that, we would more or less kind of change those 3 pieces, right?
Yep.
And then maybe some other little minor stuff, but if we were to kind of do a driver setup position here.
Yep, so now ball position is really opposite the left instep,
Yep.
all right? And one thing it's not that you need to feel this in your setup, but I want you to feel it maybe as we get into transition or downswing or near impact,
Yep.
is take your right hand off your club and just reach it for the side of your right knee. Side of your right knee, good. That's gonna start to increase the amount of tilt that we have. So there you go. There's vertical, and now as you reach, that increases the amount of lateral bend. That's the thoracic section of the spine, middle of the spine.
Love it.
And we're going to feel much more of that ultimately at impact than we would in your setup. So when you watch tour players hit, it's like they might start with, say, 5 to 7, 8, 9 degrees of tilt, but by the time they're impacting the ball, they're in the mid 30s to low 40s with how much tilt they have, so that they can swing up while they are de-lofting it.
Love that.
Okay, and that's key to high launch, low spin.
And so with the driver, the setup pieces to be able to accomplish those, like you mentioned, the ball position has moved forward relative to my iron for angle of attack.
Yep.
Right? I have added tilt, right?
Yep.
I'm here, side bend.
Yep.
And so I like that little checkpoint. If I was with my irons, I'd be more...
Correct, you'd be above your knee by a few inches.
Love that. So it's a super simple way to check this. If I go down, I'm going to start stealing that.
Good.
And down the leg, just kind of by the kneecap, gives me my tilt here. And then for me, the only other conscious thing that I would say I would do or kind of throw in would be the width of the feet. Potentially with the irons versus the driver, right?
Yeah, and
wider.
Absolutely. And if we wanted to hit another extreme with the irons and say, okay, now we're going to hit a little pitch shot, then let's narrow the stance. Let's take that same right hand and reach for the outside of your left knee. Right hand off the club, reach it for the outside of your left knee. Now that just tilted you the other direction.
I've never seen that before. I like that. So now that keeps me more kind of level.
And slightly ahead of the ball.
Gotcha.
Which, if you're just hitting a chip shot, you kind of want to be a little bit past the ball.
And to that point, one other key thing I think for setup in the contact of what are you trying to do with these clubs? With the iron, right? We got the ball on the ground that I need to hit down more. And so where your head is in space is a key indicator of that. Not only do I want my head to be more forward for the irons, right? More level. But then if I pull my driver out, and I tell people this all the time, I really, via the tilt, am getting my head farther behind the ball.
Absolutely.
Right?
And
my head's going to be
so there's your effective ball position, so you can scoot over even another inch. Boom. Absolutely. Which inherently now puts you well behind the ball.
Not over here.
Yeah, exact. And that's a big mistake most people make.
Huge.
It's like the ball's up there, so they have their head up there. When we watch tour players, they're 8 to 10 inches behind the ball.
The other thing I like, Marty, is when I go here and I put this on the inside, I feel like it makes my hand come a little bit more, keeps my shoulders square, underneath.
Absolutely.
Compared to when I just went like this, that feels like
the
my
shoulders will open. Yes.
And so because the purpose of the clubs are different, the setup needs to change in those ways. The ball position, the tilt, and the forward bend are the primary pieces.
Correct.
Feet width then would be sort of a minor piece that would go along.
That'd be a
with it.
minor piece.
Yeah.
And I tell people normally just with a driver, widen your right foot. Get the ball position and just widen your right foot, you know, because if you widen both, then the ball
Change the
really,
ball position and everything.
exactly.
So those are the setup fundamentals. Doesn't need to be more complicated than that. Let's talk about the backswing pieces, if they change or not, with iron versus driver, then we'll get into downswing follow through. Okay, so part 2, irons versus driver, is the backswing. We went over the setup pieces. Let's talk a little bit about the backswing pieces and how they might differ from iron versus driver, right?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So backswing, one thing that will remain somewhat similar is what the hands are doing from address to when the club gets to about parallel to the ground. So swing it back to, good. So the wrists really haven't had to do all that much from address to waist high.
Yep.
Go back to address, please. And just swing it back again to waist high. There we go. So the wrists aren't doing anything. If you can see that now Eric has about 30 degrees of turn here. Now if I say, okay, Eric, turn your pelvis back. Now the arm starts to go higher. At about, when the left arm's about parallel to the ground, the wrists are already set.
Yeah.
So because we have a little bit more forward bend with an iron, we're less likely to turn past 90 degrees.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
with a driver we might be standing a little more vertical, which allows us a little more rotation.
And I think they might see a little bit difference because we're bent over in terms of where the club face would be in space in terms of relative to the arc.
And because of the length of the club.
Exactly.
So a driver that's out here, well, that's going to have a completely different arc than a 9-iron that's right there.
Yep.
So.
And where my posture is going to be in, like if I'm more bent over with a 9-iron, let's say, right?
Yep.
And my face relative to the arc.
Yeah, because it's a steeper arc or a steeper plane.
Yep.
It will appear more closed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And I think that's important. I think not a lot of people talk about that. If I had the driver and I was more up here.
Yeah, and you went more around, because of the length of it, it will appear slightly more open.
It's still square to the arc.
It's still always square.
To the arc.
It's just square to that arc, not this arc.
Exactly. And,
Okay.
and because of that, then my driver would appear less tilted down,
Yes.
right? Compared to maybe what the iron is.
But it's still square to an
Still
arc.
square to the arc, which we want to keep stable release pattern.
Yes.
And so, okay, I have my iron swing, we have our setup position. When I'm working back, I think for us, the big picture things you're working on for the iron or driver, like if you have a swing assessment and there's 1 or 2 pieces you have to work on, let's say during my backswing, I go too far up, let's say.
Yep.
And I want to gain some depth.
Yep.
I need to gain depth with all my clubs.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So what I would say in that case, it's like, okay, we're not going to do anything with your wrists,
Yep.
and I want you to just start turning both your pelvis and your shoulders. And boy, now the arms are moving in as the club is also.
Yep.
I don't care if someone gets a little inside or the club gets a little bit behind the hands, because normally a career slicer never gets there.
It's so foreign for them, it's not even fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hooking position.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. And so, listen, the backswing pieces, there's micro stuff Marty and I could talk all day about. I think the big picture stuff, whereas, hey, the setup things are very distinctly different what we talked
Yeah.
about. The backswing pieces, whatever you're working on, there might be some minor nuances, but it's mostly you're trying to do the same thing. Now, that's not true for the downswing follow-through,
Correct.
right? And so let's dig into what changes with iron versus driver downswing follow-through. So iron downswing patterns, what do I need to do, Marty? Because the ball's in the ground, I need to hit more down on the ball, right? What
Okay, yeah. So yeah, hitting down, think of that as being a result, the result of where the ball is relative to you. So go ahead and make your backswing. So we've got nice turn there.
Yep.
First move, this will actually start to lower as the pelvis starts to turn. Now, what's important for people to understand is the low point of the swing is going to be underneath the left shoulder. So as you keep turning, the left shoulder's already past the ball.
Yep.
Okay, so that's going to help the low point get past the ball.
Yep.
Now we've turned. If we wanted to measure a good measurement, would be about 45 degrees at the moment of impact. So go ahead and bring it all the way down to impact. You should clearly see the back leg from a target line view.
Yep.
And maybe even some separation between the legs from the target line view.
Got it.
Your chest is going to be facing downward and forward,
Yep.
which again makes the left shoulder further past the ball, helping the low point to be past the ball. From that position, if you just raise your right heel up a little bit, Good. You feel the pressure there. You're using that pressure to just push and keep turning through there, which now when you're pushing,
Yep.
we just moved your spine into extension
Yep.
because you have leverage to push.
Love that.
So kind of you know, in the old days, like when I was learning, they would say, okay, bump your hips way over here.
Yep.
Well, you know what? I can't turn from there.
That's right.
It's hard to turn from there.
Yep.
So basically, I want you to get this left shoulder, maybe even the left hip, a little lower to the ground
Yep.
while you're turning. So if you made a fist with your right hand, I said, okay, Eric, draw your arm back. Good. Give me a deep squat, and now throw an uppercut to my hand. Well, now you're in a position to use the ground.
Absolutely.
And we got you turning rather than sliding or whatever people want to call that.
Yeah, kind of a good pivot
And
drill.
that's a great pivot drill.
Yeah. And so let me hit a couple. Let's
Sure.
do that little feel with that. I think the important part is the ball's in the ground, so we want to hit a little more down as a byproduct of what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
And the thing that I can really do to help me control an iron off the ground is get my left shoulder more down and forward during the downswing pattern,
Yep.
move my low point forward. So if I have my setup pieces that are going to help, right? Less tilt, a little more bent over, ball positions neutral. As I work back, my first movements on my way down would be my left shoulder feeling goes on down and kind of this way.
Yeah, down and forward would be a good way. Yep, and now that helps to increase the pressure here and here, so now you can start to use your legs to keep turning.
And just explode out of it.
There you go.
And so even the beginning of learning that, maybe just kind of get the separate feel of just the shoulder. Let me feel my left shoulder kind of working down and forward, and I feel me getting lower and a little bit more open. I feel that
Correct.
low point. And I'm going to just hit a couple with that feel. Left shoulder kind of down and forward, just some little half ones. And so for me, that felt really solid. For me, how that feels different than normal is I have a tendency to go this way.
Yep.
Right? And so my shoulder goes up right away,
Yep.
which when I time it with the driver can hit up and it's cool, but with the ball on the ground presents some contact dynamic loft issues. For me, that feels much different than normal to get this kind of down and forward and changes my compression quite a bit. I'm going to do one more, it felt good. So left shoulder down and forward more with the iron to change the contact. And now if we brought in the driver, right, so let's talk about how that changes.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. So if we brought in the driver in my downswing pattern, we already have our setup positions, right, we talked about. We have kind of neutral backswing positions. Now, how does that change with my driver?
So remember we added a little tilt possibly in your setup, but now we're going to feel that more in the downswing.
Got it.
Okay, so now we'll make the same backswing, not a lot of wrist to waist high. We've got some shoulder turn, and now we're going to let the pelvis keep turning. The arms will then raise. Okay, so now your head is clearly behind the ball.
Yep.
Okay, so now this will go down slightly, as will this, but it's going to start turning up a lot faster for the sole purpose of the shoulder needs now to be behind the ball.
Yep.
So that we can have that same lowercase y geometry swinging upward into the ball.
Love that. And so the feeling I would get there compared to normal would be, hey, my setup's different automatically. I'm kind of understanding from the video that where my head is and my tip, I'm going to change my angle of attack. And so if I get my good takeaway, I get my good turn up to the top, my left shoulder's still going kind of down a little bit here.
But it's going to start going up faster
than normal.
Yes.
And
So
almost
what we'll see with a driver is you're going to, and you know, if that's 0 degrees, you're going to have 35 degrees, 40 degrees of tilt with a driver.
Yeah, exactly.
But only about 20 degrees of tilt, 22 degrees of tilt. So you're not going to have as much side tilt, and you can measure that by measuring the shoulders or measuring the belt to the middle of the neck.
So the iron and the driver swing in terms of the shoulders and the downswing is not the same.
No.
I will have more tilt with my driver on purpose.
Yep.
So that I can hit more up on it. We'll talk about kind of controlling the dynamic laws in the
Sure,
set.
absolutely.
And in an effort to be able to hit the ball farther. Right.
Absolutely.
So let me do one with just that, and then we'll talk into the minor details of the follow through. So I'm feeling the same pieces. I'm feeling my shoulder kind of getting up and back. Back.
Yep.
Right? A little bit more up in the follow through. Not as far down and forward. I got the ball teed a little lower than normal, but let's try one. So left shoulder a little bit more up and back. And that was hit good for me. Angle of attack trajectory wise was solid. And it's okay, right? And maybe even necessary to feel that my shoulder does a completely different thing there from my iron to my driver.